I'm proposing a new methodology called proximity theory that can analyze live events, that asks two questions of all data. How close are things, and how are they close? Many disciplines lack a methodology for events that can analyze dynamics, things that change. In my discipline, liturgical theology, and in performance or theater studies, there was no methodology pertinent to all the data sets. For example, in liturgical theology, the main methodology was derived from text analysis. The difficulty is that an analysis of a text cannot account for the sound of the voice that expresses the data, which then remains inaccessible to text analysis. To use proximity as a methodology, one need only ask two questions. How close are things, and how are they close? Since everything in the universe is physical, all things are close, one to the other. Because of this physicality, proximity works everywhere. One can say of all things that they are all close. Any discipline that deals with physical things, even including abstract disciplines, can pose these two questions. For example, one may have two armed camps in the desert, the Taliban and the Canadian Army. The two camps are 15 kilometers apart. This distance corresponds to the question, how close are the two forces? The most powerful weapon held by the Taliban is a rocket-propelled grenade with a range of 1 kilometer. The most powerful weapon in the Canadian Army camp is a howitzer with a range of 20 kilometers. As a result, the Canadian Army is closer to the Taliban than the Taliban are to it, since the Canadian Army can touch the Taliban with its weaponry. This capacity answers the question, how are the Canadian Army and the Taliban close? The most advanced suspension bridge in the world had a problem. In certain conditions, it began to move and traffic had to be stopped. What caused this phenomenon? The question revolves around the proximity of water to the bridge, but not the water in which the bridge sits. The significant water is in the atmosphere. The phenomenon emerges under conditions of light rain and light wind. That the water and the bridge are close answers the first question, how close are they? When it rains, water envelops the cables holding up the bridge. With a strong wind, the water is blown off the cables. In windless conditions, the water drips off the cables. But when the wind is light, the water that envelops the cables changes the shape of the cables, and, if conditions persist, the cables are no longer cables, but wings. The thousands of cables become a very complex wing and begins to fly. The wind speed and hydraulic form shift answers the second question, how are the water and bridge close? The third example is the subject of my dissertation. Theater-goers often do not hear all the words an actor speaks. To determine the first question, one may say that speech is close to ears, that the two things are close. But how are the two things close? When there is a problem with comprehension, it is often a problem of proximity. The words spoken are too close to each other. When this happens, two words become one word by means of the sound of the two words. For example, the two words and he become Andy. When the theater-goer hears this strange word, he tries to understand the sense of what he is hearing, and thus tends to not hear any subsequent speech in the play. The actor has just lost the audience. To resolve this problem, one may insert a pause between the two words, in effect pushing the words apart, decreasing the proximity between the two words. In a theater or church, well-spoken speech may be called correct speech, or, as a neologism, orthologotic speech, from the Greek ortho, correct, and logos, speech. For either space, there is an oral rule associated with orthologotic speech, the rule of 3 seconds. In the event, each word needs 3 seconds to begin, to travel in the space, and to subside to silence. This rule ensures that the words can be heard clearly, thus allowing the hearer a chance to interpret them. Orthologia is an example of a response to the second question: how are the words and hearers close to each other? Proximity, as a methodology, poses 2 questions that can analyze all datasets in an event: visual, auditory, gustatory, aromatic, and tactile. It can use the same language for all datasets. It can also use the same language for all disciplines, while leaving the data intact, the realities themselves, as well as specific tools proper to each discipline. You've seen 3 disciplines that use proximity with ease: strategic military studies, hydrology, and theater studies. Try applying it yourselves to a simple problem, a more difficult problem, and to the most difficult problem in your field, and see what happens. You may be surprised.